think we'll start. Uh, for those who don't know me, I'm Rabbi Lance Sussman of Reform Congregation Knesset Israel in Elkins Park, PA. And every Wednesday night since early in the COVID crisis, I've had this program called Rabbi Talk. It's a Zoom program, and about half the times I do the talking, and about half the time we have a guest. And tonight we have a very special guest and friend of mine and friend of Knesset Israel. And that is Mr. Chuck Feldman, who's going to need to unmute himself or it's going to be a quiet evening, who was the president of the Holocaust Awareness Museum and Education Center, which since August of 2020, in the middle of this pandemic, has made its home in Knesset Israel. So we are now neighbors and collaborators together, collaborator in the good sense of that term. And I thought it'd be important for everybody, but particularly members of the congregation, to learn more about this wonderful museum and education center and important community asset. They do incredible work. And instead of me partially representing it, I thought we'd go to the top and have Chuck tell us about the museum. I'm going to ask him about the museum. I'm going to ask him about himself. I'm going to ask him about future programs. I would ask those online with us to stay muted for now. I know I cannot mute AI people forever. If you have an urgent question as we're going along, you can use the chat function. I see, I'm going to check right now. I see there's a few there. And then later in the evening, we'll open it up for live questions and back and forth between whomever would like to talk and Chuck and myself. I see that in the chat we have Dion Hartz-Warsoff, and she said, I am the child of a survivor and know her, Ruth. So Ruth, wave so we can see who you are. Did you know your daughter's going to be on? And she's coming to us in Salt Lake, from Salt Lake City, Utah. So Dion, welcome. And you can go ahead and eat your lunch while we have this program, because I know it's earlier in the day. It's so nice of you to join us. That's just lovely. So Chuck, make sure you're unmuted. And my first question is real easy. How did this museum get started? What's its history? What's its origin?
Well, first of all, and you can hear me?
Yes, we're good.
Okay. First of all, a tremendous thank you to you, Rabbi, and to the entire congregation. This is and has been and will be an amazing shidduch. I mean, we will continue to do amazing work, and we are thrilled that that we are at KI. And I will let you know that, like the Jewish people and the comments that we wander around, the fact is that our museum, we believe, is the oldest continuing museum in America. It was founded in 1961 by Yaakov and Sheila Riz, literally in the basement of their home in Oxford Circle in Northeast Philadelphia, 1453 Levick Street, if any of you know the numbers in Oxford Circle, right off of Castor Avenue. And Yaakov, in fact, was born in Lutsk, Poland. And when he was about 15 years old, he was out in the streets and heard what we would today call a community organizer, Zev Jabotinsky, who was in the streets basically warning the Jewish people, fellow Jewish people, that the Nazis were coming. Well, you know what? Those days were not today. Today, if somebody sneezes in Australia, everybody knows about it. back then, when Jabotinsky was in the street warning the Jews that the Nazis were coming, they were like, well, who were they and what are you talking about? But Yaakov was convinced, so he went home to his parents and he told them, we have to leave. And they looked at him like he was, crazy. What are you talking about? Because some guy in the street is talking about something that we have never heard about. We have to leave. And secondly, where would we go? To the east is Russia, not exactly a great place for the Jewish people. And so, no, we're not going. And for several months, Yaakov attempted to convince his parents to leave. They refused. And so he left and he went into Russia. He joined the Red Army, actually. And when they found out he was Jewish, they put him in the Gulag. And at about 5'1", 5'2", and weighing 100 pounds before the Holocaust, he spent 5 years in a Soviet labor camp. And while he was there, he made a promise to God that if he survived, he would tell the world, and especially young people, about the Holocaust. Well, he was tough as nails. We talk about our survivors, and anybody who survived, and Ruth, who I'm so happy to see her here today, would join in with this. To have survived the Holocaust, you had to be physically strong, you had to be mentally strong, and you had to be lucky. And Yaakov was physically and mentally strong, and he survived. And when the war was over, he was released from the Russian prison. He went back home and found none of his 83 relatives there. Presumably, most of them died in Auschwitz or one of the other death camps in Poland. So he made his way to what was then Palestine, fought in Israel's War of Independence, met his wife-to-be Sheila after Israel became a state in 1948. His wife Sheila came to Israel from Bensonhurst, New York, to visit relatives. They met, they fell in love, and in 1953 he made it with her back to America. They settled in Northeast Philadelphia. He became the principal of a workman's circle school, and he fulfilled his promise to God. He put, again, what we believe to be the first Holocaust museum in America in his basement. And almost like a one-man band, think about this, in that time period, there were very few survivors who were out there talking about it. He went out and he talked at synagogues, at churches, at any schools, wherever he could go. And he became what I guess best could be called as a neighborhood celebrity. And I got to know him because I had a business around the corner on Castor Avenue, the Garden of Earthly Delights, which at that time was an ice cream parlor and restaurant. And he used to come in and get ice cream for the family. And one day I said, Yaakov, I want to see the museum. And he said, of course. And that's when I first became involved. And through the years, we were able to get Yaakov out of the basement, at first to a storefront. And then we were able to get to Gratz College when it was at 10th and Tabor. And we moved with Gratz College to the Mandel campus. From there, we wandered over into New Jersey, and we joined with a group in Cherry Hill in one of their buildings, but we realized we couldn't service the Philadelphia community from there. We came back and we settled in 2001 at what is now Klein Life. And we were there for the last 18, 19 years and decided it was time to go. And Rabbi Sussman and the folks from KI said, come here. And so that's what we did. I want to tell you one other quick story. Unbeknownst to Yaakov, his one brother Moshe had survived, and ironically was in Israel at the same time. But You know, you didn't Google people in 1948. One was in northern Israel, one was in southern Israel. They didn't see each other for the 5 years that they were both in Israel. Yaakov comes to America, and in 1961, 8 years later, his brother Moshe is walking through an office building, and he looked just like Yaakov, and somebody said, "Yaakov, what are you doing here?" He said, "I'm not Yaakov, my name is Moshe." He says, "Aren't you Yaakov Riz?" He said, "No. My brother was Yaakov Riz, he died in the Holocaust." And the guy said, "No, he didn't. He's in Philadelphia. Here's his phone number. Call him." And Yaakov received what he later referred to as his call from the dead. It was chronicled actually in the Evening Bulletin. But intrepidly, Yaakov soldiered on, and he unfortunately passed away in 1985 of pancreatic cancer. But from that point on, we just continued to grow the organization, and the real growth took place starting, I guess, about 10 or 11 years ago. We were doing with 4 or 5 survivors, we were doing 15, 20, 25, maybe up to 30 or 40 programs a year. Over the last 12 years, with the help of people like Ruth, you know, our heroes like Ruth, we have done, and the best part about this is not fake news. You could look this up. This is for real. The reality is, over the last 10, 11 years, we have done thousands of programs, school programs. We have reached well over 250,000 students. Starting about in 2015, we started to Skype programming. And now, of course, over the last year with the pandemic, all of our programming, as Ruth will tell you, is virtual. And that's been obviously a negative in the sense that our survivors can't go out and see and have the students see them, but they see them virtually. The positive side of it is that we are now doing more and more and more programming outside of the Philadelphia area, all over the country, all over the world. Last year, the year before the pandemic, we did slightly over 300 programs and saw 39,000 students. This year, even with the pandemic, we will see well over 10,000 students, and we're still doing an amazing amount of programming. And this is due to our wonderful survivors. We still have 12 survivors working with us who are actively doing programming. Unfortunately, last year was a terrible year, although I believe none of them to COVID. We actually lost 6 of our survivors who spoke. But we're going to continue, and that is our mission. And our amazing staff, led by Abby Gilbert, who is the Director of Institutional Advancement, Jeff Quinn, who is our Education Director, and Dr. Ruth Almy, who's our Program Director. We are now doing still an amazing amount of programming. And our mission is a simple one. It was Yaakov's mission, and that is to reach and educate as many people, especially young people, about what happens when hate is out of control, especially when it is state-sponsored. And we have a saying in our organization, hate never takes a vacation, so neither can we. And that's who we are, and that's what we do, and we're going to continue to do it for as long as we can, and we're going to continue to reach tens of thousands of students every year. And Ruth will tell you that the most frequent comment that a student makes after hearing one of our amazing survivors, and for those of you who are educators, you'll really appreciate this. And I've heard this dozens of times. The kids will go up to the survivor and say simply, "You changed my life." And that's what we're about. That's it.
Wonderful description of history and mission. I want to clarify your founding dates about 1960. Does that?
61.
61.
Yes.
So you really just had a milestone.
Yes, that is correct. The 60th anniversary. Yep.
Got it. And then I think in '64, the Nathan Rappaport statue, which is now on the Parkway in town, was dedicated in front of Gratz at Tabor. And it was also there was a claim that it was the first public monument to the Holocaust in the United States. There's something in the water or the hoagies in Philadelphia. We seem to be ahead of the curve now. Seems to me we're facing, well, let me remind people, you can use chat to ask questions or make comments anytime during it, but we will have an open question and answer a little bit later once we have some more common ground established. But Chuck, in my opinion, there are two particular threats, let's call them, right now with respect to Holocaust awareness. And they are, and I don't know if they're in order or not, but I'll just say both of them. The first seems to be a growing ignorance about the Holocaust among young Americans in particular. There were recent reports in the press that maybe a majority of Americans of school age don't know anything about the Holocaust. And then simultaneously, we have the problem of active Holocaust denial and the rise of various forms of neo-Nazism in America. What's going on out there? Why, despite your efforts and the Holocaust Museum in Washington, why are we losing ground here? Are we losing ground, or what do you think is the status?
Well, I'm not sure, the data, and the Holocaust Claims Conference did an amazingly thorough study of the level of Holocaust knowledge from the folks between the ages of 18 and 40, what are known as, who are known as millennials. And they did an exhaustive survey. They released the findings a few months ago. They actually did surveys in all 50 states. And they asked Rabbi, as you said, a bunch of questions about the level of knowledge. Do you know what Auschwitz was, and so forth and so on. And the level of knowledge was appallingly low. There's no question about it. I'm going to say a couple things. Number one, Pennsylvania, and there are, by the way, 13 states now that mandate Holocaust education. And we are active. One of our active members, and actually at one point was a former part-time staff member, Rhonda Fink-Whitman, has been out lobbying for all of the states, one at a time actually, to mandate Holocaust education. We're now up to 13. Only a few years ago, that was only 5, the 5 states being Florida, New Jersey, New York, Illinois, and California. But when the Claims Conference did their study, they ranked the states based on the level of knowledge of these various questions that they asked about the Holocaust. And Pennsylvania, which does not, unfortunately, have mandated Holocaust education, we ranked 5th in the country, ahead of all of the 5 states that I mentioned that have had mandated Holocaust education for years. How could that be? Well, I'm not going to tell you that the Holocaust Awareness Museum is responsible for all of it, but we're responsible for a great deal of it. Because if you look at the fact that we did reach literally 250,000 kids, and these are all people who now fall into the 18 to 40-year-old age bracket. And by our statistics, 80% of them were in Pennsylvania, because most of it was being done, as Ruth would tell you again, by driving around or driving an hour or two into schools in Pennsylvania. We had to have had an amazing impact for us to rank number 5 and literally ahead of New Jersey, New York, Florida, so forth and so on. Rabbi, the answer is it's not enough, but it's also the case that we have to do what we can do. And just because we can't solve the entire problem does not absolve us of the responsibility of doing what we can. And
Sounds,
your vote, right?
Your Cavo, so you're waxing Talmudic, and I love that.
Well,
That's good.
every once in a while.
Yes, that's fine. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what is your, since you're in the business, so to speak, in your opinion, where is this surge in specifically neo-Nazism coming from in this country? The United States as a country fought against Hitler. We lost hundreds of thousands of soldiers. There were a lot of Gold Star families across the country, many at KI. And I know young Jews in 1941 were ready to go and signed up in extraordinary numbers. And yet Nazism holds an allure in certain elements of American society to this day.
There's no doubt. There's no doubt that anti-Semitism is on the rise, and it's coming actually from both political extremes. You're absolutely correct about the rise of neo-Nazism, but and what I would say to that is that, and what we say to the kids, those of us who facilitate the programs and talk to the kids ahead of the program and then help with the question and answer period afterwards. One of the things that we tell the kids is that you come to school, you learn history, you learn this, you learn that, with all due respect to your teachers. When you go on to high school, to college, to life after that, you're going to forget some of the lessons that you learned. You might even forget some of the names of the teachers you had. You will never forget today. You will never forget the opportunity to listen to somebody like a Ruth Hartz tell their story. And it's important, and we tell them that their job in school is to learn. Their job today is to sit and listen and come up with good questions for the survivors. And then afterwards, your job goes on. You should tell your friends, your relatives, your neighbors, what it is that you heard. And you should go out and understand that you will come across, especially as we all get older, and there aren't, I mean, right now, there's still thousands of Holocaust survivors with us. There will come a time when they won't be here. It will be your job.
Yeah.
If you come across somebody, look, a Holocaust denier, you're not going to stand and argue with somebody who's a neo-Nazi and convince them. But what you can do is, if the ignorance, which Rabbi you brought up, the ignorance is out there, it's not political. It's just, how could that have happened? I don't know. I've never heard about it. And if they say, well, the Holocaust, how could that have happened? You say, you know what? When I was in fill in the blank, middle school, high school, whatever, I heard Ruth Hartz tell the story. So yes, it happened. That's our job.
We know that the clock of the universe is running, and we have many fewer survivors today. Your organization is trying to attract and train second generation voices. People actually like myself. My mother came from Germany to this country in 1938. How's that going? How effective is second generation? And I would also say, I believe second generation people like myself inherit some of the emotional trauma of the Holocaust, it doesn't die with the survivor generation. Something is transferred there. I know there are people studying it, but I know it has profoundly shaped who I am. And as I meet second generation people, they all seem to have an awareness that they're different. How's the training going? How's the recruiting going?
Once again, you're absolutely correct. And a lot of second generation, especially, it is not obviously an easy thing to grow up with parents who are Holocaust survivors. And we hear from second generation people all the time that whatever I mean, imagine being Yaakov and Sheila's 3 children and growing up with a museum, a Holocaust museum in the basement of your home. And, you know, and a father who is constantly out there talking about the Holocaust. It's not an easy thing. And so a lot of second generation people are not jumping in to do it. We have some. The good news is that, again, we still have many, many survivors who are willing and able to go out and talk. And quite honestly, when we started making calls 2 or 3 years ago with the second generation people who wanted to do programs, and we said to the schools, you know, we have so-and-so who's the child of so-and-so, and I said, don't you have a survivor? Think for a minute, and if you remember, and unfortunately this gentleman passed away a little over a year ago or 2 years ago, the guy who used to pretend to be Ben Franklin downtown, right? He used to walk around and people would go up, tourists would go up and ask him, if the real Ben Franklin were still alive, why would anybody go talk to that guy? So the reality is that most of the schools have said to us, well, don't you have an actual survivor? And of course we do. So the second generation, yes, absolutely. They will be the next ones, but we're not ready yet for that complete transition, and it will be a transition.
When a survivor goes out in the name of the museum, are they free to say what they want? Is this a matter of documentation alone, or is there an editorial, let's call it, that goes with this? And that could take many forms. It could be anti-racism. It could be fighting xenophobia. It could be a Zionist interpretation if you, let's say, go to a day school. Are they free agents, so to speak? Does the museum have a message beyond documentation?
Simple answer is no. We do not tell our survivors what they can and can't say. And I will tell you that our survivors are, all of them, present amazing stories. And we have had, and we've been doing this a while, zero complaints about their message. Some of them deliver the message a little bit differently. There's no doubt about that. So we don't. Now, afterwards, if there's a question that's asked that the survivor had difficulty with or wanted clarification, obviously we work with them. And before we send out a survivor, we meet with them, get their story recorded. And by the way, if you go to HAMEC.org, and I'll be saying that a couple more times, you can go to what is known as our legacy library and see our survivors and their presentations, and all of the virtual programming we're doing now is being recorded. So we have an amazing log of video as well. I can remember one of our survivors, and we did a program many years ago at the Free Library in Center City. And it was actually a large charter school that was close by. And parents were invited. And the auditorium was filled. There had to be maybe 300 students and parents. And Dave presented his presentation. He survived Auschwitz. And afterwards, a parent who identified himself as Palestinian asked Dave the following question. Don't you think that the Israelis are treating the Palestinians the way the Jews were treated during the Holocaust? And it was the first time that, and this is not coming from a student, okay, this is coming from a parent. It was the first time that I remember going, oh my God, what is Dave going to say? And Dave looked at him and looked at him and looked at him and said, I feel sorry for the Palestinians. Their leadership takes their money. They don't help them in any way. And I feel sorry for the Palestinian people. If they had a government, the Palestinian Authority were treating them better, they would lead better lives. The guy sat down and shut up. You know, I'm not going to tell you, Rabbi, that we never chat with our survivors and they chat with us. Well, what did you think about this? What did you think about that? Every once in a while, there's a question asked. And by the way, having had the opportunity again to facilitate obviously dozens and dozens of programs, I stand off to the side and watch the students as they're watching the survivor. And sometimes we'll think, oh, look at that kid, he's sleeping. And then that kid is the first one to raise their hand and ask a specific question that has nothing to, that has specific question about what the survivor had said. Every once in a while, there's a question that's asked that the survivor hasn't heard. One of our survivors, Mike Herskovitz, did a program, and the kid, he had been taken and eventually again was taken to Auschwitz. He obviously survived. And the question was, he was in Czechoslovakia. And when the Nazis came to take him and his family, the kid asked the question, Mr. Herskovitz, if when they came to take you and your family away, would you have wanted to know what was in store for you? And again, I went, oh my God. And Mike had never been asked the question, and he just stared for a minute. And he said, no, I wouldn't have wanted to know because it was so frightening. And I was a 10-year-old boy. And no, I would not have wanted to know. You know, I often say that if you come and watch one of our programs and watch the students, and again, Ruth will back me up on this, you walk out of there with a smile on your face sometimes, because we are dealing with the most tragic event, at least in modern history, and yet you're here watching a survivor educate dozens and sometimes hundreds of students. And so you walk out feeling this was great.
Do you have any American soldiers who were liberators in your bullpen, so to speak?
Yes, yes. We had a total of 4 liberators. One is still with us, Don Greenbaum, who helped to liberate Dachau. And he works with one of our survivors, Ernie Gross, who was in Dachau. Ernie was in Auschwitz, and when the Russians were about to liberate Auschwitz, because the Nazis and our former education director, Hal Kessler, who helped to write one of the first Holocaust curricula in the country, in the city of Philadelphia, he's a retired school administrator. And Hal Kessler taught me and everybody else, if somebody says, well, the Nazis, or today the neo-Nazis, they're crazy. No, they're evil. They're evil. And, you know, I apologize. The question.
Yeah, it's okay. It was about liberators.
Yeah. So Ernie was on the train because the evil Nazis put the Jews on a train to Dachau to be exterminated there. And on the train ride itself, the Americans bombed the train lines. And so the train was delayed for a day, which saved Ernie's life. Train gets to Dachau, Ernie's put in line to be executed. He's about an hour and a half away from becoming the smoke that they could see coming out of the crematoria. And that's how he had lost his parents earlier. And he had accepted his fate. And all of a sudden, Ernie said that the guards are throwing down their guns and running, and here come the Americans. And for many years after that, Ernie, not on a daily basis, but was looking for a liberator.
Mhm.
And about 20 years ago, Don Greenbaum, who was Jewish and an American liberator, his wife, Shelley, wrote an article right around Yom HaShoah in the Exponent, My Husband, the Hero. And of course, Ernie's friend said, Ernie, here, call this guy. And the two of them have been out speaking together. And of course, they spoke at KI.
So I'm going to ask one more question at
Sure.
this point and then open it up. I know Neil online has been asking, but there may be others. Dion, I think you may have a question you might want to rephrase yourself, and maybe we'll give Ruth a chance to say something, not obligatory, but have some voices here. Long before I met you, but when I was at KI, I was doing a lot of work with German youth. Had managed to work out a program with the Ministry of Education in Germany to bring German teenagers to stay with KI families, and then we would send our kids to Germany in an exchange. And we had an incident with the first group. It was a very lively group of kids, 15, 16 years old. Took them in a school bus down to Independence Hall because it was Philadelphia. And the bus went completely quiet once we got there. And I said to these kids, it was about 15 or 16 kids, what just happened? You're a noisy group, you're lively, you're party animals, and it went completely silent. Am I missing something? And they said, well, we were told we have to be good guests and can't say anything negative. I said, but you went quiet and you're the least quiet kids I know. Talk to me. And they said, we don't like it here. And I said, what don't you like? I said, this is Independence Hall. This is the cradle of American democracy. And one of the girls said to me, there are too many flags. I said, what's wrong with flags? They're American flags. What do you object to? And they said, we're Germans. That's nationalism. We thought there were going to be banners that said freedom, liberty, human rights, things like that. And they were actually taken back by the level of nationalism, which was actually, in my opinion, rather benign. It's in the context of well, it's really Philadelphia, but it's really a national park in the United States. And that, I have to tell you, it kind of shook me a little bit. A couple years back, I was invited again to Germany, and I went to a high school in Leipzig, south of Berlin, in commemoration of the 80th anniversary of Kristallnacht. And when we were talking to the kids individually, the line they used, I don't know if it was rehearsed, was, "We do not feel guilt, we feel shame." And again, it was startling and somehow seemed correct. In teaching about the Holocaust, is there an aspect that transfers to the American experience that would involve either national shame or national guilt? These German kids, these were top-notch academic high schools, and these were very, I thought, very sophisticated. I wish my German was as good as their English, but it was really remarkable. When you interact with kids, sometimes you get much more sophisticated responses than you imagine you're going to get.
I honestly don't have an
Yeah.
answer for your question.
Okay, that's
I
okay.
think it's obviously an interesting observation.
Yeah, in terms of my run as a Holocaust educator, if I can,
Sure.
be old enough to, those were probably the two of the moments that got to me the most. Neil, did you want to? I know you wanted to share. I don't know how to do the technology for you to actually show
Well,
a picture, but if you just want to give a very brief report about your own background.
My own background. I grew up in that difficult family dynamic of a very strong-willed father, Holocaust survivor. My mom was born and raised in Philadelphia. Total different personalities, and it was quite interesting. Living under, I don't want to say his rule, because my dad was the most loving father in retrospect that anybody could ever have. And I am who I am and how I am because of my kitchen table. That's the metaphor is how I describe my life. And who would have known this when I was a kid, that I was going to become a mensch, for a better term. But there are a lot of stories that crossed around the kitchen table, crossed over. And you mentioned liberation earlier and liberators. So my father was from Drobnin, Poland. And when he was a young child, maybe a teenager, he would go to the market. And a lot of towns would meet at a market. There would be a market in between towns. So all the towns can go to this one market, kind of equidistant or so. And he became friends with one of the guys from another town. And shoot ahead to 1939-ish. That family went to the United States. My father stayed with his family, and then look what happened, right? So in 1942 he goes into the camps. His friend Sam, if I remember correctly, joined the army in the U.S., ended up liberating, I don't know if he liberated Dachau, but he ended up at the DP camp my father and all his friends, other survivors were at. And when the GI said, okay, we're going to delouse you, obviously the reaction was no, we're not going in there. We're not. My father recognized one of the GIs and vice versa. They started talking Yiddish to each other. And then my father said to everybody, I'm getting chills. It's okay. I know him. We're okay. It's okay to listen and go in and get cleaned up and deloused and everything.
Amazing.
And I met him because there's a monument in Staten Island, I guess it is. I'm actually nervous talking in front of 30-some people here, to be honest with you, even though I'm talking to a computer. And we go every year, and there are less and less survivors, or maybe one or two left.
Right.
Now it's all first generation or / second generation there. And I still go, and I brought friends up there in the past. And so I met him there. I met the liberator. and a lot of other people over the years as a 10, 11, 13, 18-year-old kid going there every year. And you mentioned that, Rabbi, I think you mentioned something about being a second generation. There is certainly, for lack of a better term, like a sixth sense of life. Like it's just, I can't explain it.
Mm.
You can't put it into words, but I definitely feel there's something, and I've seen this growing up with my peers and my friends. I was always a little different in my own head. And it's just truly amazing. I mean, my father was on a train. I guess it had to be after Dachau. And that's where he was liberated. The army came over the hill and he was liberated while on the train. And it went back and forth because they didn't know what to do. And then all the GIs started running. I mean, all the Germans.
Thank you. Dion, your mom is Ruth. I wanted to hold off on that before we share documents, please.
There are only two.
Okay. Neil, do you want to?
Well, we can go later. I mean, it doesn't matter. I don't want to. Yeah.
Okay.
Whatever.
Dion, you've put some comments in the chat. Your mom is Ruth Hartz, who's on line with us. So I thought first I wanted to give you an opportunity to state to the group about how easy it was to grow up with Ruth as your mom. And then second, you have written a few things if you want to share them to the group as a 2G person, as you've put it, second generation. Are you interested?
Sure, but I'll be brief. First of all, I am not touching that first question.
Okay.
And I think a lot of you know
With some connection issues here.
Like many survivors.
Okay, we're having a
Is that better?
connectivity issue. Maybe try it again. Couldn't hear your
Is
comment.
that better now?
You are coming through.
So I was just saying that, you know, the difference for me was that my mother's parents survived and my great aunt and uncle and their daughters survived, but they didn't come to the United States. So I spent my life going back and forth. So that gives you a little bit of a different perspective. Can you not hear me still?
No, you're good now. It was
okay.
Echoing before, but now you're clear. Yeah.
And I also think because my father was born and raised in the US and his family was intact and my mother's family was not, that had a significant impression on understanding the loss. Plus, my grandparents, unlike many survivors, had photos from before the war and talked about their siblings and their parents and their cousins, all of whom were murdered. So I had a very vivid picture of who those people were. And I do speak, I'm actually, my mother and I are tag teaming tomorrow practically. I am interviewing a survivor tomorrow for the Salt Lake Yom HaShoah commemoration. Sunday, I'm speaking at the Utah National Guard about my family's experience. And later in the month, I'm speaking at Veterans Affairs. So
my goodness.
I've taken on the mantle. But like my question to Chuck is, you know, I do what I do, but it would really be interesting to learn more about what I could be doing. And I apologize, I still have my business background on.
Chuck, you want to respond about 2G education?
Well, sure. And we do have one of our survivors who passed away actually now several years ago, Kurt Herman. His daughter, Shari Glauser, does go out on a regular basis. She's now doing virtual programming, obviously. And the answer is, we'll put you to work. You know, we will absolutely. I mean, we're, as you can tell, pretty passionate about this. And so we're constantly looking for more programs, and we're constantly looking for more folks who can do the programs.
And I think now, and now with the advent of Zoom,
yes,
I've been very, very involved with Holocaust education in Utah. This year, a resolution was passed to encourage Holocaust education I'm not going to get into the politics of a mandate, but I've worked it's very complicated.
Yes, it is.
But I worked very, very closely with the head of the social studies curriculum, and we have a very robust page. And I would like to add HAMEC because now with Zoom, you could have survivors speak to kids out here in Utah.
We're ready. We're ready.
My
I
mother's
know.
done it multiple times in person.
Yes.
I
Yeah,
once
and
almost killed her. She spoke 5 times in 2.5 days, and I think she was ready to kill me.
do you think there's any dimension to, you're in Utah, it's predominantly Mormon. Does that make the way you present Holocaust different?
It's tricky because the Mormons feel that they have a lot in common with us because they were routed out of Illinois and they faced persecution. So they feel a very strong affinity to the Jews for many reasons, including some theological ones. I think the harder part is that everybody's white here. You know, and yeah, I'm blonde, I'm blue-eyed, and people don't think, they look at me and they're like, oh, I didn't realize you were Jewish. It's like you're an oddity, and you also like feel like you represent a whole people, which of course was never the case back east. You know, my husband and I, or my kids might, well, not anymore, they don't live here, but you know, we might be the only Jewish person that most of the people we interact with have ever met.
Right. I have to tell you, I once read that, I think his name was Bamberger, Simon Bamberger.
He was a governor of Utah. Yes, he was.
And when he was elected, whatever the big newspaper in Salt Lake City was in those days, ran a headline, which I saw a picture of, that said Gentile elected governor.
That is correct. Utah is the only place where a Jew would be a Gentile. And he actually campaigned on that.
Yeah.
And I think that was the, yeah. No, that's a little interesting piece of Utah history.
Right.
Well, anyone who is not Mormon is Gentile. So it's the only place in the
Right.
world where Jews are Gentiles.
Right.
Ruth, would you like to say anything about your experience as one of our primary speakers for the museum?
I don't know about primary. No, I'd like Chuck to explain what Microsoft did to the museum, that we now speak all over the world through Microsoft.
Yeah, we were actually, we were about 6 or 7 years ago, we decided to attempt to raise some money to do virtual programming with Skyping, and you know, figure out how to do it. And in fact, they saw somebody from Skype to the Classroom, which unfortunately has been downsized. But at that time they were up and growing, found us and said, join us, come work with us. And we said, well, that's great. And so we developed a quick relationship with them. That began our experience with Skyping programs. But now, obviously, with the pandemic, and of course, it's been beyond horrible, but what has come out of it, and I think was mentioned earlier, is that now people are used to this venue that we have tonight. And so our museum, for example, a couple of weeks ago, 3 separate survivors did programs, 2 to 2 different states and 1 to Bulgaria in a 48-hour period. We're working with We Are Here, which is an organization, an international organization, Jewish organization, that is based primarily in Australia. And so we are going to be able to send our message not only across the nation, but across the world.
Yeah, I spoke to a school in Cape Town, South Africa.
Yep.
Less than 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
And then Canada, Toronto, near Toronto.
Yeah.
And
yeah. Interestingly, again, one of our other survivors, Dave Tuck, was doing a Skype program, this was years ago, to Italy. And one of the languages that he learned after the war was Italian. He went to Italy first after getting out of the camps. And so he sat there and he said to the teacher, he asked the teacher, you know, I can speak in Italian. And the teacher said, no, speak English. We want our kids to, we're teaching them English and whatever. When I was younger, there was a whole talk about an international language that everybody would talk. It was called Esperanto. Well, that lasted for about a day and a half. And the good news is that there is an international language. It's English. I'm not going to say everybody in the world speaks English. That's not my point. But we can reach out to countries all over the world. And we are and we will.
Tell us about your museum. We've talked a lot about educational outreach. What about, I know we have COVID, but you've created space, museum space at KI. So
absolutely, absolutely. One of the, I guess the most interesting thing about our museum, and Ruth can talk about this as well, is that almost everything we have in the museum directly relates to survivors that are with us or are unfortunately no longer with us. And some of the things that we have in the museum, and Ruth, you can talk about what they are specifically, but are from Ruth's experience. And we are so fortunate. We are in on the second floor, rooms 203 and 205. And we now have, Elise Marlowe has set up an amazing exhibit downstairs. And Rabbi, I'm actually going to come see it in a few weeks. And we talked about that yesterday. And so it's amazing stuff. And while we are mostly an outreach program, and obviously during the pandemic, we're not having schools come to the museum, we will. We will. And that will be part of it as well.
I want to say the exhibition that Chuck's referring to is in the Temple Judea Museum, which is in the lobby of KI, guest curated by Lisa Marlowe, who, like Ruth, straddles the fence between KI and the Holocaust Museum. And it is really worth coming to. I would call in advance, and we follow all the rules about social distance and masks. This is an extraordinary art and artifact exhibition. I hope it stays up for a long time so that people will be able to come in. It's just too good not to see it. Literally contrasting dark and light through art and photography. It's fabulous.
It's supposed to stay open until June 30th.
Okay, so that's.
And for those of you who obviously can't come at this point, again, I'm going to give you the website, HAMEC.org, and it's a wonderful website. And one of the things you can do there is you can take a virtual tour of what we have up on the second floor. You can not only go to and listen to Ruth's presentation, so forth and so on, you can do a virtual tour or view the virtual tour of our museum.
Chuck, does the museum have representation tomorrow on Yom HaShoah and any other future plans that we should?
Yes. We have tomorrow night, Danny Goldsmith and HAMEC along with ADL, Danny Goldsmith will be speaking. And again, all of the details are at hamec.org. Go to the website and you'll see that. And on Sunday, Pete Stern will be talking at Or Hadash. And Ruth did something as well. Ruth, you want to talk about that?
Well, our head of education, Jeff is going to show a video.
Right.
Excerpts of my talk and excerpt of Mr. Goldsmith's talk, and we were both hidden children.
Right.
Well, tell them what you're doing tomorrow.
Well, with you talk. Well, Deanne got me into a university in Utah, and she's going to introduce me to how many students?
I don't know. We'll see.
Any other future programs we should be aware of?
Yes, but that's our educators luncheon, which will take place on May 20th. And actually KI was the home, has been the home of the luncheon even before we joined and came to KI. And we will be honoring our educator of the year is Randy Boyette, who is the education director and has been the education director, not only for Southeastern Pennsylvania, but for South Jersey and Delaware for the ADL, and works with the Echoes and Reflections program and the Bearing Witness programs. We'll be honoring Randy, who certainly deserves it. And it'll be a virtual event on May 20th. That's at 12 o'clock on a Thursday. And we do, although it will likely be a hybrid event, we do an annual dinner in November. Details to follow. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at a little past the hour point, which is the usual length. I wanted to check with everyone and listening in tonight to make sure we're not missing anyone's questions or comments. Neil, you want another shot at it? And then Chuck, you'll have an opportunity to make a closing statement.
Sure.
You're not running for office this time, but I think we want to hear a closing statement from you. Yeah.
Chuck, does the name Wilbert Pierce ring a bell at all?
It does not.
He had an amazing collection of Holocaust Nazi memorabilia in the city above, what's the big store that's now at the Navy Yard? Oh, God, help me.
Urban Outfitters?
Urban Outfitters. Yeah. He was on the second floor. And I was there. I don't think he's there anymore at all. This is 15 plus 20 years ago. And he had the most amazing collection. And I'll Google him, but number one. Number two, my father was liberated May 1st. So in 3 weeks is his anniversary, which he always made his second birthday was May 1st, 1945. So I just wanted to throw that out for
That's
him.
great.
Did you want me to show Neil's father's 2 papers?
Go ahead now. Yeah. Thank you, John.
Oh, yeah.
So this I found online Googling. And this apparently is his paperwork from Auschwitz to go to Dachau. Looks like January 28th, 1945. And he's been in Auschwitz since October 17th, 1942. My father didn't see the light of day for like 3.5 years or so. He worked the coal mines. And this is his, I guess, the initial sheet. This I got in Auschwitz. I went to the admin office and I told them my dad's number and they gave me 3 or 4 or 5 documents. So I know some of these other people, and my dad's kind of in the middle, right below halfway, 77459.
Yeah, I found them. Yeah.
And
I mean, I think of Schindler's List when I see this,
So it amazes me. Whatever.
He was a craftsman, or
He was a tailor.
I see here it says Schneider. Yeah.
He ended up having a tailor shop, clothing store, tailor shop, 11th and Samson for 30 years or so.
I see.
5th and Fairmount, and then 11th and Sansom. And one other quick story: my father got hit with shrapnel in Auschwitz, and one of the guards said, "Okay, off with him. He's going this way." And another guard saw that happen and said, "What are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, he's injured. He's gone." And he's like, no, bring him back. He's too good. and the other guy could have sneezed and missed my father. Anything could have happened. It's just amazing how a blink of an eye and life could be different for me, for him, for you just don't know.
Yeah, as we all know, there's a lot of controversy about whether or not the Allies should have bombed Auschwitz, which would actually make for an excellent lesson in working with more educated and sophisticated kids. But what is not known is that Allied bombs did fall on different parts of Auschwitz. Some of it was slave labor and industrial. The largest camp was Auschwitz II Birkenau, and even there were stray Allied bombs resulting in SS casualties. It's a long, complicated story that we can leave for another program. But thank you for having.
One other quick thing I read the other day. They're coming out with a movie about the Yom Kippur War, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. Helen Mirren is playing. What's her name? First president.
Golda Meir.
Golda Meir.
Right. Yeah, the
So-
Israelis don't like her. American Jews still like her, but Israelis generally do
Why
not,
is that? I didn't know.
because of the 73 war, and it was their Pearl Harbor, and they blamed her for it. So she.
Not Helen Mirren. Golda.
American Jews still have quite an affection for Golda Meir. but
I do.
not the same in Israel at all. So Chuck, you want to wrap it up and give us some parting words about the Holocaust Awareness Museum and its purpose, and why we should support your work. I definitely, personally, professionally, and institutionally support your work, but everybody else should hear it from you.
Thanks again, Rabbi. And you know what? I think it's all been said. And the reality is, and I've been watching the faces, and there have been a lot of smiles. And the reality is, we need help. We need more people to continue our mission. Our mission is, as we stated, to educate, and to do what we can to lessen the amount of hatred against Jews, against Blacks, against anybody, Asians. We need to be out there, and the lessons can be best told by our survivors. And so what I urge you to do is to join our team, become part of the team, whether that's to become a volunteer, whether that's to find us programs. And now, we will do programs all over the country, all over the world, by coming to our events, and supporting us, whatever you can do. And, the sky is the limit for us. And we are so happy that we are now at KI. You have no idea. We just smile every day. And thank you.
We are speaking for KI. We want to say how blessed we feel that you're with us and available for some partnership. We are distinct organizations, but there's definitely some synergy growing between us. For our members who are listening online, please be aware that we have this very special asset now inside of our building, and KI is our spiritual home. Make sure you become familiar with our spiritual cousins and guests who are with us. We have a lot of things in common and common purpose, and we're hoping that your wandering is over, and that this is your home for a very long future, so you can concentrate on your work and not on the mechanics of organizational life and where to set things. So Chuck, you have given yet another evening, and your wife has donated another evening.
Oh, no. It's the other way around. She's
Okay.
happy when I'm.
She's happy when you're distracted. I hope we've learned something about the museum and some of the nuances about Holocaust education, and that everyone here will support this partnership that we're in, our synagogue and this museum, which we now understand is clearly an international organization. So thank you all for being with us. Next Rabbi's talk is next Wednesday night, and we have a major from the Israeli army speaking about the current military security situation in Israel at 7:30 p.m. And we also have a soldier who is one of the people who operates the Iron Dome rockets along the Gaza border. And we will be hearing from them in association with a group called Friends of the IDF, another one of our partners. So I hope you can tune in next Wednesday night as regular. We have Shabbat services at 6 p.m. And finally, for the KI folks online, April 23rd and 24 is our spring celebration, and we are celebrating the strength of our community during these past difficult 12 months. Madam President, any final words from you?
That's wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for being here this evening, and stay tuned to KI.
Very good. Erev Tov, Lila Tov, everybody stay well, get your shots, wear your masks and distance so you can be around for a long, long time and join us for these important programs. Take care. Chuck, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
All righty.
Thank you.